was something normal. But nothing we looked up made a noise anywhere near what we heard. I fell asleep that night, or morning, at 5 a.m. I woke up 2 hours later, and I could not go back to sleep. All I could think about was what happened just a few hours ago. Gene woke up at around 11. He stayed at my house until he ended up leaving at 4. Once he was gone, I went over to my brother's room to discuss with him what had happened. As it turns out, my old house resides on Native American territory. It then occurred to me that what we likely encountered was a skinwalker after all. My brother also told me that he thought he heard a woman's voice in the corner of his room that night. The voice that had said, "You saved them." Everything mentioned here happened last night, and I'm still scared to death. We all agreed not to tell him that it wasn't close to what happened, and to stop walking at night and to never return there again. That's an agreement we stay true to forever. Not here. Probably when the ghosts come out. So this story is just a short one. Nothing just in closer detail. But it's the strangest. It takes place in a house in Gameget, Michigan. The song was built in a cul-de-sac neighborhood. What's behind it? Houses, and a cow pasture in front of it. You'd seen and heard this thing plenty of times. At least I would come to terms with it 2 years later. I don't know if you heard. And the Wendigo, which has some depictions of it resembling a deer or elk. I think both are said to be of political uses. Now, the place we lived in at the time was actually haunted. I know that for sure because we had ghostly activity happening almost regularly. One night, my sister was in her room sleeping at the time. She woke up in the middle of the night. She said she recalled feeling just not right. When she looked over at her window, she saw this shadow. Not the shadow of a person or anything like that. This shadow reflected through the neighbor's light. She said it looked like a deer's head with antlers. Whatever it was, its shadow was just standing there at her window. It was there for a minute, before it eventually disappeared. There were no branches or any trees there, nothing that could have made that shadow. Besides, that wouldn't explain why it just disappeared. She freaked out. She told us that very next morning, but never found any logical explanation for it. There were times where we would often leave our front door open during the night before heading off to bed. We would hear coyotes and the neighbor's dogs going off every once in a while. But there were these 2 nights I'll never forget. One night our dad had the door open again as usual, when suddenly we heard these loud screaming sounds coming from the cow pasture. It caused our dogs to about 9:10 at night. We've since moved out and began to experience anything like it again. Are ghosts from Emerald 99. I work on a horse farm in Kentucky. The property that is the lower was once many separate properties, and there were a few farming and undocumented claims in farms and lands. They are cared for and respected, kept away from the range of the horses. Descendants were allowed to cultivate their respect. Personally, I've had experiences with disembodied voices and the low shadow figure. My co-owners have had other kinds of experiences, and many of the other barns, and the barn my experience haven't had. I was working at a barn this past winter, and my barn partner often leave me alone to tend to the horse we had in the barn while she checked the horses in the fields. It was kind of sweet. Nothing too ominous. One day I was finishing cleaning the stove outside the barn, and at the other end I began to hear two women talking to each other. I went out to see, thinking it was our bosses. But when I got there, there was no one around, and no vehicles between paths and barns. Later I was sitting in the playground, and it sounded like someone was walking down the dirt road. The lead road, clicking the glass as they walked. Rhythmic, click, click, click. I got up and looked, but again, there was no one around. And on the other end of the barn, I heard the sound of something underneath the stone. They have very classed, distinctive railroad blocks that were being carried or hung up or shoved to make speed and movement. After my partner returned, I told them about it, and they said that every homeowner has had some kind of experience like that. They even heard what sounded like a horse rustling through the straw, and snorts in an empty stall, no straw, just raqualin. As we sat talking later in the day, there a woman came around the corner where we were. First, there was me and the bus. After all this, I needed to work more. It was a very unsettling feeling. Now it seems like it was just a barn going about its business, relying on Anna. Something stalked me at a camp on Tom's. From Van Coyote. I live in Tennessee. I have my life. As a kid, I was an Boy Scout. To make my mother proud. Here in Tennessee, we have a big scout camp called Camp No Troubles. It's a massive camp with archery and everything but Boy Scout basic equipment. I was made to go as my troop was going there. I think this happened in 2010, a long time ago now. There were several other troops there in many other campgrounds, with kids and adults in different campgrounds, with all the bathrooms a decent walk from the campsites, and showers even farther away. My first day there, I oddly felt as if I was being watched whenever I was walking. Mind you, the buildings were all practically between, and it was mostly dense Tennessee forest. I nearly never made it the second day there, and even that couldn't have prepared me for the third day. Every day after supper, the troop was to shower in a community shower with each other. Being a shy person, I didn't really like that, so I asked if I could wait. And Scoutmaster told me yes. But if I waited, I was going to have to walk to the showers alone. I argued about the buddy system and got told that Scoutmasters don't have time to wait on those that are picky. So I swallowed my pride and waited. About 45 minutes later, my troop came back, and it was getting dark. It was about 7:30 p.m. in the evening, and I gathered my things and began to walk. Being one to talk to myself whenever I'm frustrated, I vented to myself as I walked, not noticing until about halfway to the showers that the normally active woods around me had gone silent. Now, I'm no hunter or whatnot, but even as a kid, you know silence like that is usually a bad sign. So I picked up the pace and continued my way to the showers. At a certain point, I heard a low, raspy growl and the sound of rustling leaves. As a kid, I was scared, and I began to run, hiding quickly in the shower building, which had a towel closet one person could fit in with some squeezing. I squeezed in quickly and shut the door as quietly as I could. I began to hear those sounds getting closer and closer. Then, there was quiet. For about 2 minutes, it stayed quiet. So I stayed as quiet as I could. Through a crack in the door, I saw it. A tall, pale thing. It looked like a person, almost, but with no lips, no hair, and it was horribly skinny. Its hands were spindly, and the tips looked like claws. Its teeth were reddish yellow, and its gums were black. It stepped into the building and walked around, growling and hissing in a raspy tone. I began to tremble, almost crying, but I held it back. Eventually, this strange creature slipped back out the door, but I stayed hidden in there. I couldn't bring myself to just step out. I shut my eyes and simply waited for someone else to find me. Eventually, I was found by another troop, and I walked back after their scoutmaster let me use the master's shower near their camp. I never went back, and I left the scouts that very same month after my mother gave me approval. Listen well, never walk in the woods around that camp alone. And if you ever hear a raspy growl, turn and run back to your camp. Don't test fate or luck like I did. My weird childhood from Jolly Jello. As someone who grew up in one of the most urban parts of my country, and always heard that the woods were the most haunted places, I was quite surprised when I saw and heard as many things as I did. After all, the other tales of the women in my family who have this almost sixth sense were always either religious or rural ones. For context, it seems that this gift always jumps a generation. It's always the ones that have a birthmark on their right cheek, as I've noticed that me, my grandma, and my great-great-grandma all have it. Once is coincidence, twice is probability, thrice is possibility. Now, I've had a very nice childhood. That sort of early 2000s feeling of growing up with no worries, other than your Tamagotchi dying. I would spend my days with my dad, and nights with my mom, since my father worked the night shift, and my mother had the usual 9 to 5. My routine would be waking up, spending time with my dad, having lunch and going to school, and later Dad would pick me and my mother up and bring us home. Soon after that, he'd go to work. He'd be back by 3 a.m. to eat something, only to be home again at around 6 a.m. My only real problem was bedtime. I hated going to sleep alone. I would always wake up during the night and see them in the hallway. Shadowy figures, ones that almost resembled my dad, but I knew for a fact it wasn't him. Maybe it was the size, but again everything looked big to a 6-year-old. There was also this sway to them, the way that they moved. I couldn't stop thinking that they reminded me of my father. If he was a dark, shadowy, floating paranormal creature that didn't make any noise and seemed to move really fast, he would definitely look like that. I saw these beings every night, but as the scaredy cat that I am, all I could ever do was stare at them, watching their movements as more seemed to appear at every blink. First, it was just one, but as time went on, there were more. I remember counting 8 of them at once, all going between the kitchen, living room, dining room, and bathroom in their crazy dance, as my stomach turned on itself in fear, until I passed out from tiredness, only waking up in the morning. This went on for about 2 years, until one day I decided it was enough. I was tired, sad, brilliant 8-year-old heart, but not so brilliant mind, I mustered up some courage, went to my door frame, and whispered, "Daddy, is it you?" That was a bad idea. Every one of those shadowy figures all looked at me at the same time. Those hollow eyes. It was the first time I'd actually looked at their faces, and suddenly I wasn't so scared. They looked at me and disappeared, calmly like fog going away in the morning. It was peaceful. I never saw them again, but I don't believe they meant any harm. Maybe, just maybe, they were as scared of me as I was of them. Or they weren't aware that someone could even see them and decided to move somewhere else. Or maybe they hid themselves better. But again, they never did any direct harm. And even though I don't understand why they were there, I know that the way they looked at me was way less scary than how some of the living have. Do not play with the unknown, and definitely don't let your guard down. But do keep in mind that not everything unexplainable out there is there to harm you. Most disturbing Uber encounter ever. From Garbo. I drove for Uber for about 3 years. It was a mistake. I racked up insane miles on my car, almost spent more on gas than what I made, and encountered some very rude and even crazy passengers. People just don't have respect anymore. Now, I'm not saying you should respect every stranger by default, but if you pay for a ride and hop into someone else's property, in this case their car, and you start to act a fool, then I've got a problem. There were stains, tears, and even cigarette burns in my car that never would have been there if I hadn't started this gig. That brings me to the stain all over the driver's seat. After I tell you this story, you'll know why I had to have my car impounded. I drove from where I lived, a medium-sized town in the Northwest. Population is about 130,000 people last I checked, so that number might be a bit off. It's a nice place, but it had gone down the crapper in the last 4 years. The state I lived in is heavily Democrat, and I never knew a single member of my family who owned a gun. So never once did the thought even cross my mind about buying and carrying a gun with me in my car. In the end, I was defenseless on the night I needed protection most. The night was slow. I'd gotten only 3 requests in a 3-hour period. I was planning on calling it quits for the night in the next hour. Within that time, however, I received a notification. A new passenger. They weren't far from where I'd parked, which was the parking lot of one of my favorite burger joints. I accepted the request, and it only took about 10 minutes to arrive. The passenger was a middle-aged man. He was bald and wore dark sunglasses. He wore very skinny jeans that absolutely did not fit him, but he had somehow managed to wrangle them around his waist anyway. And his hoodie was as dark as his jeans. I quickly noticed holes and tears all over it. As I pulled up and he climbed into the back seat, he started to twitch. Every other second he seemed to whip his head from one side to the other, and I could hear him mumbling too. I'm not sure he was saying anything in English either. Great, I thought. This guy is on something. Sure, maybe I was wrong to assume something like that, but it wouldn't be the first time a homeless person on some kind of substance ordered an Uber they never intended to pay for while strung out. "Hey there, how's it going?" I greeted him as I began to pull